Hey everybody, welcome back to the quest for the bestest from Backlog Banter. Today we are talking about the trial of the Chicago 7 from last year, 2020, directed by Aaron Sorkin, starring Eddie Redmayne, Alex Sharp, Sacha Baron Cohen, a surprise character in the middle of the film. A little funky for me there, but it's a movie that, last week we said it was a nice apolitical movie, and I think we were right. Right, guys? I mean, this is fun, happy time,
Fun times all around. That's what I have to say.
Fun times.
Bill Maher was right. All of these other Oscar nominees are too dour, but this one, it's just fun. It doesn't have to do with anything historical or political in any way, shape, or form.
Nobody gets hurt. Nobody dies.
No.
The bet's gone too far, I'm sorry to say.
No, was it when I brought up Bill Maher?
Well, in any case, this film is a pretty intense courtroom drama about the 7 men who were arrested or summoned by a grand jury in the after the Democratic Convention in 1968. They were protesting, and the government, the newly elected government of Richard Nixon, decided to try to punish them and make a point. And this film is all about that trial. It's a pretty intense film, I say. But before we get into really talking about it for sure, we got to go back and review what we talked about last time. So last time we had Promising Young Woman. It was a pretty interesting film. We had a lot of discussion about it because we had some very differing opinions, and it ended up going at the number 4 spot on our list. So we're almost finished with all the Best Picture nominations for this year. We've only got one more, which we'll be revealing if you haven't been keeping track at the end of the episode. So the list as it stands right now: Sound of Metal, Judas and the Black Messiah, The Father, Promising Young Woman, our most recent edition, Minari, and then Mank. So where will the trial of the Chicago 7 end up? I do not know. I do not really know where I put it myself, but that's what we're here to talk about. So to start us all off, Tucker, give me your thoughts about this film.
Okay, so I actually just watched this a couple hours ago. Last night I was going to watch it, and then I was just sort of like holding my, I don't want to rewatch it, because I did watch it alongside Tanner and Abram for a review when it came out. That review was never posted. I'm glad that we didn't have it go up, because then we'd have 2 reviews of the same movie, want our thoughts to stay consolidated within the Quest format. But I really appreciated this film a lot more on a rewatch. I think learning a little bit more about the historical context from Judas and the Black Messiah for the era definitely improved my understanding of what was going on in the film. I think having already seen it, I understood what to expect from the amount of characters and the dialogue and the pacing and all of that. And all in all, I'm very glad I got a chance to rewatch it, because I think this is a fantastic movie, certainly worthy of the nominations that it has, and I'm really excited to talk about it here.
Well, there you go. Okay, Abram, you're up next.
Yeah, so I have not seen a lot of Aaron Sorkin's films. The only other one I have seen than this is Molly's Game, which was his directorial debut. So I was really excited when I saw Chicago 7 for the first time, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And upon rewatching, I'd say my thoughts have stayed about consistent. I really enjoy the film, but I do think that it has trouble with its own tone. I think that Aaron Sorkin really loves himself, and I think that comes through in the script, which I think sometimes gets in the way of the thematic and narrative beats. But on the whole, if people have been following along, I didn't like The Father, I didn't really like Minari, didn't really like Mank, didn't really like Promising Young Woman. This is a solid Abram win here. On the whole, I really enjoy Chicago 7.
There you go. Tanner, your thoughts, and then we'll get to what I think.
Juxtaposed with Mr. Abram Buhner, I am one Sorkin-loving guy. I think he can write a very compelling and entertaining and kinetic screenplay, and Trial of the Chicago 7 proves that. Can Aaron Sorkin direct a entertaining and compelling and kinetic film? It seems mostly, yes, in most respects. I think that there's a great ensemble cast here. As I'm sure we get into, as most biopics do, it just so happens that I come off of this a little more informed about the actual event. He takes some liberties with the actual historical events that happened during the trial itself, to improve the script for his own purposes and to make it a more concise story. Because this did take place over 100 days or so. So But overall, again, I really like this movie. I think it's about held up the same as my first impression of it on a rewatch. So, but yeah, let's break it down, fellas. Or actually, Timo, what did you think about it?
Yeah, well, I saw this for the first time. I saw it last night. I watched it. I had a Sacha Baron Cohen double feature in which I first watched his other film from 2020, Borat's subsequent movie film, and then I watched Trial of the Chicago 7. He's a pretty main character in both of them. He plays very different roles. He's very good at both of them. It's a weird combo. I would not necessarily recommend watching those two movies back to back. That said, I did enjoy the Trial of the Chicago 7. It's very tense. It held me for the whole time. I thought that the ensemble cast was good and it worked pretty well. So I think it hits a real good baseline for me. I think it's got everything and then only everything. There's a little bit more I could have wished from this movie. That, upon further reflection, but on the whole, I think it was fine. I think it was a good movie. We'll see. There's some more stuff I want to dive into, and talk about in detail, but yeah, that's.
Now the question is,
yes,
Timo, does this add to the list of films that make you mad? Politically, at least.
Yes, so this means that there are 3 films of this year's nominations that make me angry. This film takes place in a very similar ethos, a very similar tonal representation. It's a biopic. It's a biopic in the same year as Judas and the Black Messiah. It has some of the same characters as Judas and the Black Messiah. Fred Hampton shows up, and Bobby Seale is actually a member of the Chicago 7, I think, right?
Yes.
He's the 8th.
Well, yeah, he's
but he's on trial.
He's the secret Chicago 8th.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, watching this movie made me angry and made me get up and yell some things to my friends about the nature of police and authority and revolution. And, we don't need to go into that, but let's just say that this movie made me angry again.
Yeah. In other words, Timo very much identified with Mr. Abby Hoffman as portrayed by Sacha Baron Cohen, who I'd say, would you fellas agree with me that he's maybe he would be the main character of the film?
I think he's the mainest of the characters.
It's hard to parse out a main character because it's an ensemble, but I'd say he certainly, he's the comedic relief in this as Abby Hoffman. He was a performer basically he was a leftist performer who used his absurdity and media presence to garner attention because he didn't exactly have the money to run a candidate in a race or something. So yeah, that was basically Abby Hoffman's MO, was be wild and outrageous to garner attention.
Well, I think that central to the film's tension, because not only is it about the Chicago 7 against the U.S. government, it's about the Chicago 7 against each other. The tension between Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman makes the main character role a little bit unclear. Mm-hmm. I tend to think that it is Abby Hoffman because I think that A, Abby Hoffman is more interesting than Tom Hayden, and B, I think Sacha Baron Cohen's performance is stronger than Eddie Redmayne's. So I would tend to side there, but in a film that I think is pretty consistently great, that tension and dynamic didn't always work for me. I don't know how you guys feel about Eddie Redmayne in particular.
Well, honestly, I see him as the main character, Eddie Redmayne as Tom Hayden. I think that the fact the film sort of centers its main plot twist near the end around him, and also includes his presence in a lot of scene that includes none of the other Chicago 7 members in it, makes me frame the film more around his experience. But I think the fact that it is balanced around a large cast of characters, although they don't all get equal amount of screen time, it's certainly those two being the main focus of it. I'm glad they didn't choose one to stick with, and being able to discuss from whose perspective you saw as the main character makes it okay. Yeah, they did properly balance this script and give credence to both sides, so you can analyze it from multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I just want to throw in, we're talking about cast. Surprise Michael Keaton in this movie.
Oh yeah.
He was not billed as being in the film, and he shows up about, 2/3 of the way in, as the star witness. I have a little interesting relationship with that because he comes on and I just don't buy that he's Ramsey Clark. I look at him and I'm like, yeah, that's Michael Keaton. He looks like Michael Keaton looks in every other film that I've seen him. And so, while it's cool to see him in there and the character is good and whatever, maybe cast someone a little less conspicuous for that role. It's just my note on it, because I saw it, I was totally pulled out. I was like, oh, it's Michael Keaton. Hello, Michael Keaton.
See, that just made me love the movie more. I'm like, oh, it's Michael Keaton.
Yeah, we genuinely had like a surprise pop moment of Tanner and I pointing at the screen like, whoa, when we watched it the first time.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that this film is very flashy, and it's for better and worse, I think.
Yeah.
It's an Aaron Sorkin script, so everything that comes along with that, and I think we need to talk about it. He writes very good dialogue, but I feel like in the context of such a racially and politically charged movie, it doesn't always hit the way it should. And I think a great instance is the opening sequence, which is fast, and it's really interesting how the characters pick up each other's dialogue. But with that snappy music under it, and we're talking about the Black Panthers being assaulted by the police and all this stuff, it doesn't always hit. And I think that is the stem for me why this film isn't excellent, I don't think. I don't think it always understands its own tone.
My first negative note that I wrote was the opening of the film, like, wow, that music is heinously out of place for the found footage war content that they're showing on the screen. I'm thinking, okay, well, it sets the tone for the fact that this is going to be fast-paced, and honestly, the editing between the dialogue being picked up, I think, is one of my favorite aspects of the film. I think it's a wonderfully edited film, but it doesn't work in that opening sequence when you're trying to show the impact of the war and showing people being abused, and you've got this fun music in the background. It's so out of place. But in all, that particular complaint there goes away pretty quickly, and it becomes not a non-issue. But it is a signal of the fact that Aaron Sorkin wanted to have fun with this in some areas that maybe deserved a little more reverence.
On the lines of Tanner, you can go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I just wanted to shut up. I just want to say that I agree with Tucker there.
Okay. I was going to say, on the lines of talking about Aaron Sorkin, it is a very written movie to me. I used that earlier when we were talking about Mank, and I think it works much better in this sense. It's a very movie. Things happen in it that seem much like a movie to me, and I think it exists not quite in this very real world, down to earth scenario that some of these other films that we've seen this year do. I think a lot of the dialogue sounds fairly similar. Aaron Sorkin is good at writing snappy dialogue, and as a result, he writes the same sort of dialogue for your same arc. So like Eddie Redmayne and Alex Sharp as Tom Hayden and Rennie Davis kind of talk the same. Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman kind of talk the same. They're different characters because they have their traits and whatever, but like their literal dialogue is quite similar to me. And I think that's a Sorkin quirk in the film, and I don't necessarily hate it for that, because it is good dialogue, but it does, after you get along, it makes it a little muddy as to who's saying what.
I think it works pretty well because it does draw these lines in the sand of like these different leftist groups who are all brought together to be pointed at by the United States legal system and say, these are the ideas that we're putting on trial. They all vary a little bit in their execution of the ideas, but at their core, this is what we're putting on trial. You have Tom Hayden and what's his friend's name?
Rennie Davis.
Yeah. Rennie Davis, who are they're more they're kind of college kids, and they're wearing button-up shirts and whatnot. You have Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman as like the hippie guys,
the stoner bros.
The yippies, as they call themselves, and you have David Dellinger, who's a pacifist, in fact, and then you got the two other guys, and of course you have the Black Panthers personified with Bobby Seale. Speaking of the dialogue, though, I listened to a podcast about the actual event when this movie came out, and what was interesting to me was that Sorkin actually lifted a few lines from the actual press conferences and the court proceedings themselves and used them in this movie. Examples like Abby Hoffman in that press conference where he says the revolution would cost me my life or whatever. That's a full actual quote from Abby Hoffman. Or the Judge Hoffman when he says, "I've been around for a long time, and you're the first person to ever say that I'm racist." That's actually what he said in the courtroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought that the film made him out to be he's a very hateable character. I really hated him in the movie.
Frank is great at making you hate him.
Yeah. And to find that out that he said that in real life, Maybe I would have hated him in real life too.
Yeah, probably. I mean, from all accounts, he was as bad as he's made out to be in the film.
I think it speaks to the fact that Aaron Sorkin really writes this for the audience and for the audience's benefit, which ends up making the film feel really engaging, but like Timo was saying, kind of disconnected from the real world.
Yeah.
Which in the context of a film, of a cinematic experience, I find compelling, and it's executed on really well. I think there's a very real sense of frustration in the film that's communicated to the audience very well that I had forgotten about. But as soon as you get in the courtroom and the judge is saying people's names wrong and not listening to Bobby Seale, I was like, okay, I remember why I enjoyed this so much the first time. There's a real palpable tension and frustration that Sorkin communicates, but it definitely feels like it's for the benefit of the audience opposed to the characters sometimes. A great instance being when the sequence visiting Bobby Seale after Fred Hampton gets killed. I think the idea of like this being a fuck you to your fathers, as
that's
Bobby
a great.
says.
I really like that line.
It's a great. Yeah, it's a great line. It's a great sequence, but I think it exemplifies the fact that Sorkin was really interested in portraying this through his lens, through his writing style for the audience. Which there's almost a theatrical play-like element to the way this is portrayed, for better and worse, which is where I think some of my tonal issues come in. But it kept me compelled for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the strongest aspect of this film does to strengthen the cinematic styling of it, that makes you feel like, okay, this really works as a movie to connect you to the characters and the style and the pacing and everything, is the editing. I think it's so strong in moving from scene to scene, moving between sort of timelines, with flashbacks being inserted in the not interrogations but cross-examinations with the witnesses, and cutting between people saying sort of similar lines that continue. But I think there's a really interesting sense of cohesion here, because everything sort of has the same tone to it, because it's all sort of around the same idea. So they can cut between timelines, they can cut between locations and characters and moments, and it all feeds into a central point that I think really works in a style through the editing that strengthens everything around it. And I noticed the editing a lot more this time, but I think that's for the betterment of the film, because I enjoyed it so much, and I think it worked so well.
Yeah, the flashbacks really work. I mean, I just go back to think of like the classic, my opinion is the best courtroom movie, 12 Angry Men. And that film it takes place entirely within the room of the jury deliberation. And this film expands the genre and lets itself go outside and we see flashbacks of the real events. And so sometimes the cross-examination is confirming the events and sometimes it's contradicting them. And then we see like them talking about it in between the days of the trial. And I think that works. And I think the cutting between them is clear. I was never really confused about what was going on. And I think you're right that this film was written to be understood by an audience and it's not for an in-group. It's not for it's not for history buffs. It's not for courtroom trial aficionados. It's for regular people to see this and understand. And then, well, I think hopefully to get angry, because I feel like it's supposed to, communicate at least the frustration, and if not, to extrapolate the anger towards this event.
Yeah.
I think there are actually two aspects to that feed into the movie being for an audience and being, digestible for the common folk. And unlike Mank, which we complained is for an in-group, and the writing felt kind of forced for a certain group of people to understand. Well, I won't hold up a one, but they flash the names in text on screen when the character shows up for the first time, which is so useful for a large cast of characters, remembering who's who and what situation they're in, because I often have a very difficult time remembering characters when there are such a large amount of them, and I think that really helped. And also, I think the fact that they break the courtroom drama a little bit by showing the characters out and about on their free time and arguing in their little commune conspiracy house, which is I assume that was a real place. It's a little strange, but yeah. But I think showing all that allows you to connect to the characters in a way that if they only showed it from the courtroom perspective, you wouldn't be able to get. You get Abby Hoffman doing his stand-up, and you can, okay, I can apply that to his character. You get the conflicts between them in that private house or outside gathering information. And I think that works for the benefit of connecting you to this large cast of characters by putting them in multiple contexts. So you can get the multiple sides of their personalities.
I agree. Uh, uh, I want to talk about the biggest sort of liberty that I take, and it has to do with the cast as well, or the biggest liberty that Aaron Sorkin took with the story, and that is with the character of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character of Richard Schultz as the prosecuting lawyer. He makes him sort of a relatable character. He has a bit of a conscience to him. When by historical account, that was not what Richard Schultz acted like in the courtroom. He was just me. I think that actually, interestingly, that encounter in the park that he had with Abby and
Jerry.
Jerry
Rubin actually did happen, but he wasn't like having a fun banter about his kids or whatever. He's like, "Oh no, I want to destroy you in this courtroom."
Well, that's a little bit of a reframing that I would
That's a little
say.
bit of a reframe. So yeah, that's the biggest liberty that he takes. He's making Joseph Gordon-Levitt a relatable character. But ultimately, as a character in this, I think Richard Schultz really takes a back seat to people like Abby Hoffman, obviously, even Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance as the lawyer counselor.
I mean, and then we haven't even really talked about Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. I mean, as Bobby Seale, he's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the little of this that he's in, he's great. He really for the first half of this movie embodies the frustration and the anger you're supposed to feel, not even towards Frank Langella as Judge Hoffman, but also to the system in general. And interesting fact, when the bounding gagging scene that he goes through is harrowing still on a rewatch, and is well done. But another historical liberty that Aaron Sorkin took, Bobby Seale was actually bound and gagged in the courtroom for 3 days straight.
Oh, so it was even worse. So he lessened it. Wow.
Yeah. He lessened it, and then he reframed the Howard Schultz thing to be like, "Hey, the guy is in here and he's bound and gagged. Maybe you shouldn't do that in an American courtroom," which is a good line for this film, but historically, that is not what happened.
Huh.
Yeah, I think there are certainly some liberties that they take with skipping around to specific moments. Obviously, to keep it concise, to keep it not from being 100 days long. Yeah. But it does feel sometimes like we're missing a lot when they do a 90-day time skip. You're like, okay, well, there's clearly a lot that happened here, and they've been sitting on their butts for days and days on end. And it feels a little bit out of place, but you have to give some liberties for, editing needed to happen. Script writing needed to happen for this to stay manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Sorkin he had such momentum that I think that at a certain point has to be maintained, and that leads to stuff having to be stripped out.
Yeah, for sure.
If we're going to get where we're going to go and not trip over our own feet, it has to be more simplified narrative. And there's a lot of criticism. Some people in our Discord actually talking about Judas and the Black Messiah and the depictions of the politics of those characters. And again, with this film, from my perspective, I think the fact that Aaron Sorkin wrote this movie in such an approachable and understandable way is important in the broad strokes of explaining to people what happened here. Because even as somebody I'm 20, so my education is not super in depth, but going through AP American history, going through all of these courses, I didn't know about this event really until seeing the film. I think it's important as a brick through the window that Aaron Sorkin created this. Whether that brick is shaped exactly the way it should be is another conversation. But in the context of the story he's trying to tell, I think the changes are effective, and I like them.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a movie. It is somewhat fictional. You can't just make a documentary and expect it to convey, I think, the same stuff as this film does. So they're justified changes.
I sort of had a critique when I first watched this that I don't really have anymore, is that I thought it should be more about, if you wanted to build up that conflict between Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman, you could have the movie be more about the difference in winning. Because Abby Hoffman views the trial as the revolution, I think is a line that he has. We're putting the system is putting us on trial, but in the media, which is sort of Abby Hoffman's realm that he dealt with, he's putting the system on trial. And Tom Hayden was just like, no, we have to present our case. We have to win this. We have to win this court case, and then we can get back to the actual work that needs to be done. And that's a really interesting character dynamic, that difference of winning that they get into. I wish had been more about that, but I think depicting the historical events is actually mostly is what Aaron Sorkin was going for here, and I think it worked. It would have worked very well either way.
I just want to quickly list off so we can discuss them a little bit. The nominations that this film has received.
Yeah.
Best Picture, very, very obviously there. Supporting actor for Sacha Baron Cohen, who we talked about his performance a little bit. We can get into more, but original screenplay, film editing, and cinematography. Now, the cinematography I think is fine. It does the job, but I don't think it's anything particularly special. I do like how they are able to cut between courtroom drama stuff and the flashbacks to the action in the parks and the riots and all that. I think the cinematography does a good job shifting between those two. But on the whole, I don't know if I really understand why it's nominated for cinematography, because it's not stand out. Well, the rest of them I think are certainly deserved nominations.
I mean, script editing, it's all there, I think. I mean, if we're going to talk about noms, we can talk about, filmmaking fundamentals. I think it's all there. Is what I was talking about, or at least trying to earlier, that there's really not a huge amount of this film. There were no shots, there were no sounds where I was taken out, thought about it as a film. I was kept in it the whole time by the script and by the performances, and I never noticed any section, I never really noticed any of the filmmaking, whether, so means it worked. But as a film, longtime film viewer, I do like to notice the stuff when it's really trying to be experimental or trying to do something different. And so while it's good that nothing was bad, you can always wish for a little more out of these creative elements to show your story.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that maybe it's not super experimental is because, of course, so Aaron Sorkin, not an experienced director, he made, obviously, a film that we all very much enjoyed. It is a totally solid film. It is impressive for an early-on director to be making a film of this quality. But I think the reason it doesn't shift into those more experimental filmmaking things is because it's so focused on the characters. This film is entirely centered around the interpersonal relationships, around the frustration with the government, and I think all of that works really well. I mean, it's the focus of the film, and it's done supremely well. I think the interplay between Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman and the conflicts between the entire group are all really interesting. I think it played out really well, and you can see those moments play out in the glances that they give each other in the courtroom, which is a cohesive feel that I think really works and develops the characters throughout, even when they're not receiving dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd like to do a quick aside just to ask you guys what you thought about Sacha Baron Cohen and Eddie Redmayne's accents in this.
Yeah.
Because they're a little wacky on a rewatch. I'm like, that's Sacha Baron Cohen. Is he trying to do a Chicago? Is he trying to do a Boston?
I think he's trying to do a New York that isn't always landing. He says something about there is a line in the film about him traveling through states, and I think it begins in Brooklyn. I think.
Yeah,
I think
he came
that's
from New York.
So he comes from New York, but yeah, some of the other accents are a little hard to place.
Eddie Redmayne's really swallowing like his entire delivery. He's like, he's coming from like the back of his throat. He's like, "We're gonna go there."
Is he trying to channel a Kennedy accent? Maybe
he might be trying to channel a Kennedy. Apparently, he was a big fan. Tom Hayden, essentially.
Tom Hayden was a big fan.
I really like the camaraderie of the whole group, and when they're in those sequences where they're in the conspiracy house or
the conspiracy office.
The conspiracy office. But yeah, I think all of them had really great chemistry. Jeremy Strong as Jerry Rubin he's fun. I think Tucker sent a line from him that's really funny in our group chat. That was you don't send a woman to what's the word that he used?
Ensorcel.
You don't send a woman to ensorcel me. What? It means seduce. Oh.
Yeah, that was I think the sequences with the undercover cops was very cleverly edited, and that little extra, there's a little bit more there, and he's the lonely stoner that frees his mind at night, and he gets this woman that seems very interested in, but she's just trying to get intel.
And oof, do they teach you that in the academy? Yes.
Yes.
One of my favorite joke line in this is when Judge Julius Hoffman he takes time out and he's like, just so the jury knows, there's no relation between myself and Abby Hoffman.
That joke was so forced.
Father, no.
Oh, that was the one bit of levity in that, but that bit went on way too long.
Well, that's because that also actually happened. Is that Judge Hoffman being a 74-year-old judge losing his mind because he's 74 years old and also a crazy asshole. He's like, hey, just so everyone knows, there's no relation between me and Abby Hoffman. All right. I want to distance myself as much as I can from these people because I clearly knew from the beginning that I wanted to convict them.
My favorite joke, it was a visual gag. It's when Jerry and Abby come wearing the judge's robes.
Oh, that was
also actually happened.
I assume that really happened because that's like
Yes,
that's some
did.
too. That's like I would be like that's so forced. If that was written, I'd be like, no, that's so bunk. But I see it in the movie, and I'm like, yeah, that had to have happened.
I do have to, for a second, be the Debbie Downer because we've been super positive about the film, and on the whole, I am pretty positive about it. But I don't know if this film leaves much of an emotional impact when you step away from it.
I was pulling my punch on my final point here to talk about theme in the film. But yeah, I think it's gonna be on the same lines as what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that Aaron Sorkin is a little too up his own ass in this movie because I think it gets in the way of, unlike a Judas and the Black Messiah, not to show my hand for him place in the film, but unlike that, I don't think it strikes the correct tonal balance to really hit. I think ending on the reading out of the soldiers who lost their lives in Vietnam is an incredible sequence, but I think it's emblematic of the fact that Aaron Sorkin, when the film is down, the Bobby Seale sequences in particular, because this is such a dark moment in American history that the film, I don't think, treats in the way that it perhaps should. And I don't want to cast judgment onto what Aaron Sorkin should be writing into the script. But I think there is an important moment here to hammer home, not just, hey, here's this kinetic, stylish courtroom drama, but here's the context it's situated in. And I think that the film misses that in a way that something like Judas doesn't. And for me, it takes the entire experience down a whole peg for me.
I want to add.
Yeah,
can
I just go a sec?
Yes,
I'll go first. I'll go first. Sorry, I don't want to force myself in there, but
he will anyway.
I do want to force myself in there. You're right. I also take issue with like the ending because I think the narrative really peaks with the judge shutting down testimony from the former Attorney General of the United States. That's where the tension really peaks. That's where like your disappointment with the system really peaks. And then the ending just feels a little like, and it literally is. And then everyone clapped and everyone went home happily ever after.
Oh Lord, you're right.
Because
I want to know how long they read for, and B, how long the crowd clapped for.
Interestingly, that sort of moment of reading out the names of the dead, where they also read out the names of Vietnam soldiers, not only American soldiers but also Vietnam soldiers. That was sort of in the middle of the trial process, as actually historically, and the judge actually cut it off. They somehow just got it to stop quite quickly afterwards. But yeah, it wasn't everyone stood up and clapped in the courtroom because they were all so happy that I don't know, about
owning the judge.
Owning the judge. They really owned him, and then everyone clapped. So yeah, I think the thematic and the energy of the entire movie really peaks with Michael Keaton's appearance in the courtroom, and it doesn't really have anywhere to go after that. And that's why I'm not crazy about the ending.
Yeah. Despite my bit at the beginning, this is a political movie, and I feel like it pulls the punch on its political message at the end. It really has this conflicting idea of what it means to be a good American and a good patriot. And in the end, the message kind of is convoluted to me. And it's like, oh, what does it mean to be a good American? Well, that's like voting. And I really disagree with that as what this film is really telling you, because with the film builds up this idea that like to enact change, you have to do action. You have to, if our blood is going to be spilled on the streets, then let it flow through the entire city. Is the tape recorded line that gets misinterpreted, and then there's this stupidly long grammar talk segment. But that's like the message. I think that's like the true message of the film that it should tell. And that it does tell until the ending, and then the ending is kind of like, but this is really about Vietnam, and this is, we're like, okay, well, how do you expect real change? Like through voting, and like, the film has potential to be very, I think, antagonistic towards the system that it critiques. The whole film, it's not friendly towards the government. It's not friendly towards the judge. It's not friendly towards the lawyers. It's really not friendly towards the Nixon administration. The FBI. I mean, it includes shots from the murder of Fred Hampton, which we know a lot about because we saw Judas and the Black Messiah. It's a good pairing, I think. I think it's serendipitous that both of these movies came out together. But this film, I think, being written from the perspective of a white guy, it kind of misses on this real, the real radical element that it does tell until the end, when it kind of takes a nice turn and kind of wraps it up, and where the Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen conflict lies. I feel like Eddie Redmayne's character wins out when, at least how I viewed it, and I empathized with, Abby Hoffman more throughout the film. But when what is his name? Tom Hayden wins out, then that message is convoluted to me. And so like the theme, while it works most of the time, is a little diluted at the end and doesn't quite sit.
Tucker?
I more see the theme of the film as the fact that multiple people can have multiple perspectives on things and share the common goal, but that there can still be conflicts between them. And then on top of that, the theme, quote unquote, of the government is not really trustworthy to the top level, but then there are some people in it who still want to enact proper change. I think it is a complicated film thematically because that's a complicated topic to cover. I think the fact that we're talking about 7 people who had differing perspectives that were put under one roof, to try to make them one enemy for the government, for the jury, whatever, is kind of what this film is thematically as well. As you're trying to put it under one roof necessarily, and I don't know if that can really be achieved. But I don't know. I think it works in what it's trying to achieve, though. The floweriness of the ending, certainly, as you guys have mentioned, can feel a little bit disappointing.
Sure.
I do think that I just say that even though it is an everybody claps moment at the end when they start reading the lines, it is even if it's like a very made for a movie moment, it is still satisfying. At least while you're watching it. And so that's, props to Sorkin for writing that. But I have tabulated. I was complaining about voting earlier, and then I proceeded to go and text people to vote on their movies.
You hypocrite, Timo. How dare you?
But I've got a number. So that number is exactly the same as what we talked about for Promising Young Women. It's 3.75. We got an aggregate of 15 divided by 4 as our placement. So that would put it at the number 4 spot and knock down Promising Young Woman, Minari, and then Meg.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Can you share who put it where?
Oh, yeah. So, me, Tucker, and Tanner all put it at place number 4, and Abram put it at place number 3. So we don't have a very wide-ranging, we're all pretty close on this one.
Abram, the father hater Buhner.
Yeah, so Aaron, the father hater Buhner really wasn't even considering that film, because for me it goes personally Sound of Metal, Judas, and Chicago 7, which is important for me and to espouse my final thoughts in the sense that I view these films as being very complementary. But if we're looking at control over tone, over theme, I think Judas does a stronger job than Chicago.
Yeah.
That said, considering we have 3 4s and I'm the only 3, I think 4 is a totally serviceable spot to put this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's where we all put it, so no disagreeal there.
Well, that was the first time voting has worked well. No, I'm just joking.
No dissenting opinions if we're going with court language, huh?
Yes.
Hey boys, hey fellas.
I don't need your wink, wink, nudge, nudge moment there.
Now everyone stand up and clap for our voting decision.
Okay, well, that was an interesting decision. I like the movie. I think it's good. I think it is a good complimentary viewing. I want to ask you, though, between Judas and Trial, which one is to be watched first? Which one would you recommend to be watched first?
Ooh.
And in terms of order, in terms of knowledge, historical context, just a fun little question, because I was thinking about this myself laying in bed last night.
I'm gonna go with Judas, because if you flesh out Fred Hampton and then you get him as a side character in this, and then
Yeah.
they don't spend a lot of time on his death, which obviously they do in Judas and the Black Messiah. So I'm gonna go our correct watch order, which is the order that we watch them in.
Well, that's not true because we watched Trial first.
Maybe watch Trial
My-
once before.
My
and then-
correct order, which is Judas and then Trial. So I agree with you, Tanner, there. Yeah.
I just think that is the correct order because I think that the Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton plot line, that Timo, you were talking about this being written for an audience. I think the Black Panther inclusion in this film is the one place where you need to come into the film with some kind of understanding to get the most out of that subplot.
Yep.
And Judas is a good way to get information. Also, I'm holding Tanner in contempt of Quest because a lot of people get held in contempt of court in this movie. And I was sitting on that one.
That's just a
Oh,
joke.
okay.
You
That's
didn't do
nice.
anything. Oh, okay.
I
Seven.
received 59 counts of contempt of Quest.
Now here's the final bit here. I still don't know what contempt of court actually necessarily means or what effect it has on the individual who
You
has to
can
be
go to
charged
you
with
can
it.
go to
Because
jail
they just
for
handed out like
contempt of court.
fucking candy.
Well, that's because the
This-
judge was an asshole.
Yeah. Realistically, Kunstler, I believe that he would have had to go to jail for 4 years with the number of contempt of court that he had.
But
But it
because
was
the
over-
trial was appealed
over-
and then the government
Yes.
declined to prosecute because they were like, this is messed up, nothing happened.
Yeah.
We're basically trying first speech and ideas at this trial, so we're not going to touch this again.
Yeah. Well, our trial here on Quest of our speech and our ideas went pretty well, I thought, and no one's going to go to
Nice.
court. No one's going to go to
Nice
jail, hopefully, for at least a couple years, at least for this video. No, I'm just-
Timo's in contempt of Quest now for that.
Oh,
outro.
good. Yeah. Well, we're not done with the outro yet because we have to
we have to
name
talk.
off, for posterity's sake, the movie that we will be addressing last in our 2021 Best Picture nominee miniseries of Quest for the Bestest, and that is, of course, Nomadland.
Yes, Nomadland, if you were keeping track, is the only film that we have yet to do. Could have guessed that at the beginning of the episode. Don't really know why we had to hold it in suspense for this long, but
We saved it till last because it's the likeliest winner, it seems, from
It is
from
what-
previous awards shows and things of that nature.
have y'all seen it?
Yes.
I've seen it.
No, when I think of this movie, I think of Hillbilly Elegy, and I don't know how they're different.
Oh, it's. I have not seen Hillbilly Elegy, although I am planning on watching it before the Oscars, and I am confident in saying this is much better than that film. Directed by
Nomadland-
a talented.
I don't even really know what this movie is, to be honest with you.
Oh,
That's
well,
good.
it's
I think you should just watch it and enjoy it. And
Yeah. delightful little not delightful, great performance from Frances McDormand, great direction from Chloe Zhao,
yeah,
but we'll talk about that next week.
that is right. You're exactly right, Tanner. We're gonna hit all these great points about Nomadland after we rewatch it for another time, and then talk about it on the next and final installment of Quest for the Best Picture nominees ranked before the Oscar ceremony. And then once the ceremony comes around, we're gonna get to have a yay celebration for if our film that we liked the best was picked, or a sad celebration if Promising Young Woman was picked. I'm just kidding, Tucker. I will support
That's
you
fine.
in celebrating that movie. But that's all from us. We'll be back next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me, fellas. This was a good time. See you next time. Peace.